Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, I know that you've met with some councilors regarding what you wanted to see done with this money. Since we did miss this, I know you've got a plan for how we're going to get those officers and that ladder truck done. Can you please give the plan that you have in mind that you want to see what to do with this money now?
Well, it turns out that Mr. President, Councilor Winter, it turns out that the funding for stations 2, the rebuild of stations 2 and 7 are short collectively by $600,000. And we've already shrunk the footprint of the building. We've removed some of the aesthetic characteristics of the building. It's still a fine fire station, but we're short funding for both projects. And without that funding, Station 2 will be a 2-bay station, originally designed as a 3-bay for future growth and expansion for that area. Along with Station 7, if we don't get the $300,000 to pay for that 3rd bay, the project will have to be canceled. These are both great public safety projects that should be funded, that will add the quality of service, not only to the service gap that exists in the Southeast Heights near Gibson and University, but it will allow for that Ladder 7 to be put in place. It also allows for an increase in emergency service redundancy. There's only 4 units that are west of the city and that are south of I-40, 4 units. And by adding that ladder company, it adds for that system redundancy that we'd like to see to maintain our response times.
Mr. President, if I could just be heard, and I don't mean to further complicate the situation, but in the future building plans of providing gap coverage for fire protection gaps also is the Station 2, which is, of course, the university area, and the station that's planned on Gibson Boulevard. Part of the funding for these stations is the impact fee monies, and of course they have to be spent by the end of the year. And we have EC 11535, which is the land exchange agreement for the land, whereby we will be obtaining the land down in the Southeast Heights on Gibson Boulevard for Station 2 in exchange for the land on 4th Street. Well, we had inquired about the possibility of immediate action on that. And it was thought that maybe it was best not to proceed with immediate action. But now we're looking at a time frame where just the land swap agreement itself is going to the September meeting. And since we're going to be on such a time frame, and a source of that funding could expire the end of the year, we're in a bad situation where we're running up on a clock on that project as well, which could compromise these fire station constructions. And I just want to make sure that I am on the record that I'm pointing out that time is of the essence. And I know there's some issues that are related to the land swap agreement and the 4th Street and things like that. But it's important to recognize that that could compromise fire protection and gap coverage in Albuquerque as well. So we've got 3 issues. We've got the land swap agreement that deals with expiration of the federal funding. We have the issues of the personnel that's before the council in the instant legislation. And then we have the issue regarding the over cost of construction, and about Mike Reardon tells me I think it was closer to about $550,000 opposed to $600 for the shortages for Station 2 and 7.
Councilor Sanchez and Councilor Garduño.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Zaman, we talked earlier today regarding trying to find other appropriations for Stations 2 and Station 7. I know that Councilor Benton and myself and this entire council has worked in collaboration in getting these fire stations built, and also the administration. Are we going to be able to find the funds necessary to build and complete Stations 2 and 7? Because I was kind of concerned regarding some of the statements that there's the potential of canceling building, these stations.
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, I don't have any doubt that we'll be able through state grants that have already been appropriated, to MR funds, through other sources of capital funding. I don't have any doubt that we'll be able to find money to fund both Fire Station 7 and Fire Station 2 completely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Garduño?
President?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
I'd like to know if that includes the expiration of the impact fees, if Mr. Zaman's opinion remains the same, because we have kind of a hard deadline on that.
Mr. Zaman, and the expiration, is that the fiscal year or the calendar year end?
Mr. President, it's my understanding that it's the end of calendar year 2012. But the issue in this case would be spending the impact fee money and putting the project in place by the end of FY or calendar year 2012.
Now, do you have to actually spend, the entire project have to be finished, or does
Mr.
that
President, I'm going
increment
to
have to?
defer this to Mr. Romero, who's our
Okay, thank
expert
you.
in impact fees.
Mr. President and Councilors, under the Development Fees Act, which is the enabling legislation for our impact fees, you have to have the facility in service within 7 years of collecting of those impact fees, and you have to spend the money within 7 years, or you run the risk of having to refund it to the developers. It sort of gets problematic in looking at what you've accumulated within 7 years versus what you collect that first year, 2005, which is really when the clock starts, and you just have to make sure you spend what you collected in 2005 first. You could also stagger the project expenditures so that you spend the impact fee money first and wipe that out in land or planning or development costs, whatever goes up front before the actual bricks and mortar. So the spending, in my mind, is not an issue. It's whether or not you can get the facility serving new development to accommodate growth by the end of calendar year 2012.
So the has to be actually in service by the end of calendar year 2012?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. President.
And what are we going to do with what are we going to do with Station 2 and Station 7 that need the extra money to finish the project? Are we going to just cut a payout? Or are we going to try to find money from someplace else?
Mr. President, Councilor Winter, it's imperative that we finish those two projects and fully fund them. And I know we have several options in front of us, and that's what needs to be decided tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Lewis, and then I have something I want to say, I think.
And we did speak of some alternatives to the specific administration was speaking of the two needs at 2 and 7. I think it was clear that there were some, we have the time and certainly have the ability to look for other appropriations and funding